All right, I figured now is as good a time as any. We're running a little bit late. I just knew being in D.C. and 5:30 start time was going to be a little bit of mission impossible. But for those of you who didn't travel too far, like from one chair to the other here in the Innovation Center, thank you. And for those from the outside of Booz Allen, thank you also for coming. I know this resides a lot of that out of our DC Organizational Agility Practitioners meetup, which is normally in Crystal City, so geographically this was probably a challenge for a lot of us. My name is Darren Havel, co-presenter today with Client Solutions and Booz Allen to put this together. Thank you for the army behind the scenes that brought this and made this happen. Like I said, this has been probably 6 months in the sort of incubation period, and here we are May 1st making this thing happen. So what is this thing? What we're trying to start here is the Agile Innovation Series, bringing some thought leaders in our audience as well as on the stage. So with no platform for either, meaning really trying to start a conversation around some new topics, some new ideas, and bring in some new content to our community. And as we look at this, we say, well, what is our community? And this is sort of what we've come up with fairly quickly, or not quickly, but in isolation, I think would be a better way to put it. So creating a shared community of leaders, thinkers, and practitioners to explore perspectives, seek understanding, and create a community of learning. What that means to you and what that means to me may be slightly different. Some of us are in the software delivery world. Some of us are Agile coaches. Some of us are consultants just trying to figure out what this Agile thing is. And I think the key point to this is we don't care where you're coming from. It's where you want to go and how can this enrich you moving forward is really what we're trying to set the platform for. So with that said, the emphasis or theme of this series will be where will the synthesis of coaching, Agile, and business innovation take us? You'll hear very shortly from Marcia on some thoughts on that maybe are not in your current curriculum or content or mindset. But really is, we've been preaching Agile for since 2001. It's been around since before then. We've been talking about innovation since, I don't know, maybe the beginning of time in different forms and fashion. But really what we want to see is we're all working in different agencies, both public and private sector. Where do you want to take your current journey, your current client, and your current career path? And we're hoping to bring some content to this group to sort of help shape that, whether it be from the development perspective, the delivery model, the business model, product development, or product management. So we're hoping to sort of hit a lot of those spectrums and move it forward. So I don't know if any of you recognize the wall who have not been here before, but this is one of the logos that Booz Allen decided was important enough to put in their DC Innovation Center. It says, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Abraham Lincoln. So I bastardized it or stole from it, however you want to say it, and I said the best way to predict the future is to co-create it. And I really hope that's what we do here, is not make this my stage or Luke's stage or Booz Allen's stage or Client Solutions stage, but really to figure out what do we want on the stage and what can sort of drive us forward. So morphed Abraham Lincoln's quote. I felt a little guilty about it, but here it is. So with that, what we'd like to see, like I said, from Booz Allen is really shape why we're doing this, why we're doing this in the DC Innovation Center, why is Booz Allen participating in this, how did Booz Allen and Client Solutions sort of come together on this.
Cool. Hey, thanks, Darren. So, yeah, there's my real slide. I didn't want to put up a lot of words or make this about, as I say, just as Darren said, it's not about Pliant or Booz Allen. It's exciting to have everybody here. I'm really excited on behalf of Booz Allen that we are hosting something that is not just for Booz Allen people. So, for those of you, especially who are Booz Allen, whether you're watching at home or you're here tonight, by all means, treat this as a place to bring your tribe and meet your tribe. I'm excited about that. because we do work together. We need to do more work together. We're always running into each other, and it's great to be part of the community. Especially for those that don't know anything about me, my name is Luke Lacrone, and so I lead our Agile coaching practice as part of our digital strategy group. And for those of you that means something, and you're curious about the next time that we're doing a coaching boot camp, my colleague Tim here, raising his hand, Tim and I will be teaching our next Agile coaching boot camp the week of June 19th, and it'll be in Charleston. So if that interests anyone, my email address is up there, and that's why it's up there. I want you to be able to reach out to me. Likewise, if you're new to Booz Allen, not a part of Booz Allen, you're curious what's going on with Booz Allen and Agile and coaching and all that jazz, feel free to reach out as well. So, you know, every time we're engaging with clients about what's going on with Agile, I mean, many of us have been in that spot where, you know, well, they want help becoming better Scrum Masters, or they need help transitioning to becoming product owners, or tell us what Scrum is like. And that all sounds, you know, realistically, that takes a few days, and then we get into the real work, right? And so I'm excited that this topic area is as wide open as it is, because the truth is we're always rolling into new kinds of organizations, it's going to require new kinds of leaders, it's going to require new kinds of workers. So I'm excited that we can explore that here. On a personal note, as far as Marcia, who will be speaking for tonight, so I'm excited, I'm thrilled that our first speaker is going to be Marcia Acker. So Marcia means a lot to me. We kind of met 7 years ago at an early iteration of an IC Agile related coaching and facilitation class, and you know, I learned a couple really specific things from Marcia in particular. So one was, she was really the chief person to kind of share with me that it was okay to not be the smartest person in the room. In fact, it was probably much more powerful if I could bring out the wisdom of a group of people. And it really gave me an entirely new perspective on leadership, because I was very much coming from a world of, I'm a software developer, I'm a tech lead, I'm the smartest person in the room. Like, that's why they pay me to be here. And so it was a totally new path for me. The other was that she taught me that it was okay to be tired, that like facilitating and coaching could absolutely take it out of you, especially if you're just not an extroverted, love the crowd kind of person. And so that was an easy and early bond for us. And so it's exciting that Tim and I are working with Marcia and Lisa Adkins on the new IC Agile coaching track revisions. And so, you know, more to come on all of that jazz. But anyway, again, hope you enjoy the evening, and thanks, Darren, for all of your help in making this happen.
So this is a play, something very important from Luke and then just important from me. So my name is Darren Havel, probably over-certified Agile coach in general, partner with Booz at USCIS on some opportunities. Really, I came into this from an IT operations background, so not super technical, never the smartest person in the room, but sort of loved and was driven by trying to figure things out with a group of people who were willing to. So from my perspective, being here is just continue to explore, go down this journey of whatever it is I'm going to be when I grow up, and however that tends to shape itself. From a company perspective, president of Client Solutions for Agile Boutique Shop, offer training and some other, staffing, Agile coaching, etc. But really, the reason for me being here is in partnership with you, the community. Also run, so just a quick couple announcements, sort of shameless plugs. Most of you signed up for DC Organizational Agility Practitioner Meetup. We host that on a monthly basis in Crystal City at the WeWork space. They provide the space, we have the sessions there, and the content is going to be much like we have here. We're hoping to do this series on a quarterly basis, and we'll see what that looks like, sort of do a retrospective after today, and figure out what the next session and who the next speaker will be. Real quick, Jason Hall with the dirty plate in his hand, Brendan Foe, but we have May 10th. LinkedIn So those on that can't hear or outside the room, May 10th, it's local here in Reston, Virginia, Lean Agile DC conference. It's a one-day Lean Agile conference. So I won't mention the job fair. So what does Marcia mean to me? So for me, I was heavily influenced in my Agile coaching career by Agile Coaching Institute. He used a very integral approach to their Agile coaching theory and the way they practice. So I met Marcia in multiple meetups. I sort of just kept running into each other. I sort of labeled myself a Marcia groupie, much to her discomfort. So with that, learning off of Marcia and her presentation style, the way she just sort of owns her approach, and also her very different approach than what I have been taught and sort of how I've sort of matured my Agile coaching ability. It was a very different perspective. It was, we will learn about it tonight. It influenced me heavily, both on my personal perspective as well as on my professional approach. So got to spend a week with her recently doing her immersion program. Blown away again and again and again. So with that, yeah, I invited Marcia here for this talk, and I'm very appreciative for you making the time. So 2 more slides and we'll get to it. On deck, just so you know, every second Tuesday of the month for the DC or the DOPE meetup, and then we're hoping August or September for the next Agile Innovation Series. We'll figure out on dates and summer vacations and all that other fun stuff. Our next DOPE presentation will be June 13th, and it's on metrics that matter. Rob Brown, who some of you may know, now a Fed, former Booz Allen, will be leading that conversation. So, and tonight we're running a little bit late, but we'll now get started with Marcia. We'll do a quick slide. Good.
All right. We're going to watch me change out my slides. I am, so welcome. I'm humbled by it as an introduction, so thank you both. Wow. So my name is Marcia Acker. I want to talk a little bit tonight about leadership's role in creating conversations for performance and change. So I want to get you involved in the conversation. So quick show of hands. How many of you have ever had the frustration of having the same conversation over and over again? Yeah, anyone? Yes. I like to call these Groundhog Day conversations. And you'll know when you're getting ready to have them because you're so tired of having them that here it comes again, right? So we have, my daughter and I, so I have an 8-year-old daughter at home. Her name is Lauren. And when she was very young, she and I had what a Groundhog Day conversation that I like to call, get your shoes on, please. And it went a little bit like this. So it would occur, the context was typically when we were in a hurry to go somewhere. And I needed her to get moving quickly. And so I'd say to her, hey, Lauren, do you have your shoes on? And she'd say, no. And I'd say, okay, we need to leave in 10 minutes. You need to get your shoes on. She'd say, okay. So I check back in 5 minutes, and I'd say, Lauren, do you have your shoes on? And she'd say, no. To which I'd go, what are you doing? Playing? Okay, well now we have 5 minutes left. I need you to get your shoes on now. To which she would say, okay. So 5 minutes later, I'm walking out the door because I'm ready to go, and now we're late. And I turn around and I say, Lauren, I'm going, we're getting in the car. To which I hear a screaming howl from the other room, which says, but wait, I don't have my shoes on yet. Sound familiar? Yeah. So Lauren and I had a stuck pattern. I would move, I would make a move, and she would make a follow. But it's not what she intended. What she intended was an oppose. She had no intention of putting her shoes on because she didn't want to put her shoes on, and she didn't want to go. But the action that she brought into our conversation was a follow. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But first, I want you to turn to someone who's sitting near you, introduce yourself if you don't already know them, and I want you to have just a quick conversation about what is your Groundhog Day conversation that you have at work. And when I'm ready for your attention back, like 30 seconds, I'm going to raise my hand and just ask that you raise your hand and stop talking. So quick, go. Meet someone, and what's your Groundhog Day conversation? Okay. All right. If you'll just bring your conversation to a close and then hang on to that conversation because we might recall it a little bit later. So here's the thing about conversations. This is one of my most favorite quotes. It comes from George Bernard Shaw, and it says, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." We often think that we are communicating, when really we are consciously or unconsciously doing something else other than that communication. And so what I believe is one of the challenges in our work today is the way that we have or don't have the conversations that we need to be having. So Darren talked a little bit about Agile. So how do we justify or how do we explain how some teams are really high-performing teams and other teams struggle to get off the ground? They struggle to get to a place where they can get work done. Or organizations that are seeking innovation or change or agile transformation, how do we explain how some of them are wildly successful at it and others end up in statistics each year about what's difficult or hard or challenging about their transformation? How do you explain that colleague that you work with whom you just are in the flow when you work with them? It's a creative, really imaginative kind of conversation. It has a flow, an ebb and a flow to it, and you just really get productive work done with them. And then there's that colleague whom you just find tremendously difficult every time you go to talk with them. So how do we explain those things? I believe that it starts at the very core of how we have conversations, and that the structure in our conversations actually determines the performance, the outcomes that we get from those conversations, and whether we achieve sustainable change in organizations or whether we just achieve some change, but not the real change that we're going for. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I have 3 goals to cover in a fairly short period of time. But one is I want to introduce you to a language for reading the room, to be able to talk about the structure of our conversations. And if we can talk about the structure of our conversations, then the second goal is, can we start to identify stuck patterns, patterns that get in the way of getting to an outcome in a conversation? And then the last point is, what's needed from us as leaders? And I subscribe to a philosophy of leaders at all levels. But what's needed from us as leaders to create more effective conversations for change? The kinds of conversations where we can learn and grow rather than constantly be in breakdown. So that's where we're going. So Darren actually mentioned Agile transformation. So how many of you are involved in Agile transformation in an organization in some way, shape, or form? Yeah? So a majority, looks like. So if you are familiar with Agile, you've likely seen this report. So this report comes out annually. It's conducted by version 1. We are in the 11th year of this report. Every year, I open up the report, and I hope that I look at a different set of statistics in this report, and I don't. I'm proven over and over again that the challenges within Agile transformation, which is large change, really, because Agile's challenging how we think, not just how we do work, but how we think about doing work, how we think about rewarding people, how we think about interacting with our customers. But the survey's out this year, and so these are the top challenges experienced in adopting and scaling Agile. And so once again, for the 11th year, the top 4 include things like company culture at odds with core values, lack of management support, and general organizational resistance to change. So again, how is that possible? We've been at this. Survey has been happening for 11 years. We've been at Agile 17, going on 18 years, kind of as a defined space. So what is creating the challenge? I think that Harvard Business Review gave us an answer to that last May. So in May of 2016, they published one of the first articles that they'd written about Agile in their May 2016 issue called Embracing Agile. And what they said in that was, Agile has revolutionized the software industry, and now it is poised to transform nearly every function in the industry. At this point, the greatest impediment is not the need for better methodologies, empirical evidence, or significant benefits of proof that Agile can work outside of IT. It is the behavior of executives. It's a pretty profound statement. The language that I would put around that is, I would say, and I'll talk more about this, but it means that we don't need any more technical solutions to our adaptive challenge of how do we become more agile. What we need are people who can engage in the conversation of what is creating a limit that is holding Agile back as a way of thinking about business and how we conduct business. And behaviors are these actions that take place based on what we believe about a particular topic. So what happens for executives often in Agile transformations is that they do value what Agile brings. Organizations aren't going after Agile or innovation just because it's a cool buzzword necessarily. There are business reasons why it's really important. And so they do subscribe to it. They do believe in it. But many organizations hit a level where the Agile practices and mindset start to bump up against the old ways we've done things. The ways that have always worked about how we reward, how we incentivize, how we look at progress and outcomes and performance within the organization. And so in all fairness, executives are also struggling with what does that look like, what looks like for their mindset, and how does that translate to behaviors. So at Team Catapult, we think about this in terms of mindset and beliefs and habits that leaders are embracing. And we have an Agile leadership stance that we work with leaders around, and I'll just kind of read you each of those slices. We view these as kind of 8 core key habits that Agile leaders are adopting. Uphold Agile values and principles, foster collective intelligence, embrace tension, believe in the team's capabilities, delight customers, pursue highest and best use, achieve change through dialogue, and focus on what's essential. So of those, there are 2 that are really key that I want to dive into tonight, which is what does it look like in fostering collective intelligence and achieving change through dialogue? These are 2 habits and behaviors that really influence the kinds of conversations that we're having. So, foster collective intelligence. Part of that is reading the room, and we're going to take a little bit of a dive into that. One of the things, in order to be able to read a room about the dynamics of what's happening, is that we have to be able to sort out the what from the how. So Lauren and I, in our conversation, the what was get dressed. Get all of the things done that you need to get done. The structure in our conversation was more about the move and the follow and the covert oppose. When we can start to separate those two, it helps us tell a different kind of story. So on the what side, we can get kind of judgmental when we start to tell the moral story, the what story. So by that I mean, my daughter doesn't listen to me, she never does this, we always do that. That's the kind of what, like she doesn't get her clothes on. But if I can start to tell the structural story, there are different ways that I can look at that, and I can change and affect how the conversation comes out. So let's play with it a little bit. So one of the things I want to introduce you to is called the Cantor four-player model. It comes from a gentleman by the name of David Cantor from the Cantor Institute. And he spent a number of years doing research around conversation and what makes conversations higher performing kinds of conversations. So there are three principles that fall under what this theory called structural dynamics. The first is that structure determines performance. So just like a riverbed determines the flow of a river, whether it twists and turns and how many rocks it has, structure determines performance. In every conversation, there are two realities. There is the visible one, so there's the actions and the things that we can see in the room. And then there is the invisible reality, our beliefs, and all the stories that we make up about why people do what they do. So the third part is that every sentence in our conversations can be coded into one of 4 actions. So I need 4 volunteers who might be willing to come join me up here so that your colleagues who are connected via the live web stream can see you. And 4 people who might consider themselves to be foodies. So who's coming? Awesome. 1. Who else is coming? Thank you. No. Thank you. Awesome. I just need 1 more person. I'm not going to ask you to do anything embarrassing. Thank you. I've got 1 person coming. Thank you. Okay. So you guys are going to help us try out this model and what each of those actions might look like. Fair enough? Yeah? And I want you to think about kind of like how you might be an action figure, and if you were going to action figure that was molded into one of these. So the first one is a move. So if you were an action figure that was molded into a move, what would that look like? Sweet. Can you come over here so we... Nice. Okay. Yeah, just hold it, but you can put your foot down, because I am going to ask you to hold it for a minute. Okay, so here's the thing. Move in our conversation sets the direction of where the conversation's going. So it sets direction. The next one is called follow. So if you were going to follow his move, what would that look like? Yep, you got it. See, it's not hard, right? There's no trick test to this. So follow continues the line of the conversation. So why don't you actually voice a move? And now remember, you're a foodie who really loves food. Let's go to eat. So maybe give us just a tad more, like where do you want to go to eat?
Chinese restaurant?
Great. So let's go eat at the Chinese restaurant?
Yeah.
Nice. And then what might a follow to that be? Continuing.
Sure, I like Chinese food.
Yeah, nice. So follow can mean agreement, which is what that was. Follow might also be a question that says, which Chinese restaurant?
Panda Express?
Yeah, cool. So don't keep going. But so do you get so that's a move and that's a follow. So now here's the third one, oppose. Ah, so can you sculpt what an oppose might be to his move? Yeah, nice. Nice. So oppose offers correction to the move. Yeah, just say something along. So he said, let's go get Chinese. Nice. There's no good Chinese food around here. Search on. All right, and then the last one is bystand. And so bystand offers perspective on what's happening. So if you were going to sculpt a bystand.
What if we go for Italian?
Ah, nice. So I love your hand positioning, right, which is a little bit of, what's happening. And what you did was just make a new move.
Was it supposed to?
No, that's
Oh,
okay.
okay.
So you said, let's go get Italian, which is actually a new move in the conversation. So a bystand might say something like, it seems like we haven't made a decision. Yeah? Cool. So thank you. Don't go anywhere, though, because you're not done. So do you get the feel of we need all 4 of these actions in a conversation for it to be effective? So we need move, we need follow, we need oppose, and we need bystand. Move and oppose are actually on the line of what we call advocacy, meaning, we're sort of in a battle of let's go get Chinese. No, I don't want to go get Chinese. And then there is the line between follow and bystand, which is actually the line of inquiry. So what we're looking for in conversations is a balance between advocacy and inquiry, and we need both. So that's the model. We need all 4. Notice whatever judgments you might make up about what's good or bad. So that can be a real easy tendency in this model is to go follow and bystand are inactive or they're passive, or move and oppose are valued, follow and bystand are not. We need all 4. They are all valuable in order to be an effective conversation. So we're going to play that out a little bit. So we need 4. Here are some common patterns. So imagine if the 4 of you were to sculpt 4 different moves. So you'd make a move. And then you'd make a move. Any kind of move. So that was an oppose. So just make a new move, right? Like, let's go get McDonald's. Yeah. And then.
Do we have to? Let's go to McDonald's.
Great. Great. So what happens in conversations when the pattern is serial moving, it'll feel like there are 4 or 5, 10 topics open on the table, and none of them have been completed. So the effective use of this is a brainstorming session, right? So you need a bunch of ideas on the table. Awesome, let's put all of the ideas out, lots of move. But if you're in a conversation where you're trying to move it forward, lots of move doesn't necessarily help that. So you'll know you've been in one of these meetings when there was a lot of conversation, a lot happening, and you walk out and you go, what exactly did we accomplish in that meeting? That'll be your indicator that you might have been in a meeting that had a stuck pattern of move with very little follow to it. So what happens when you see stuck patterns is you need the other 4 actions. You need the other 3 or 2. So here's the next one. So if you were to make a move, let's go to roti, and then the 3 of you just followed.
Yeah, sounds good.
Nice. So now we have a decision, right? And we're going to get something to eat. Yep, that works. And this is a pattern called courteous compliance. So what happens in groups when this is the pattern, meaning it's repeated over and over and over again, is like what's missing? It's passive, right? Right? We could assume that everybody's in agreement, but often that's not the case, right? My daughter wasn't in agreement. She just didn't voice it. So it's the difference between what gets voiced in the room and then what people actually intend. So this is another pattern to watch out for. It's called courteous compliance. The third one is point counterpoint. So let's do that one real quick. So that's move and oppose. And you'd make a new move. And you'd oppose her.
I think we should go to Virginia.
Yeah. So where are we going in that conversation?
Nowhere.
Nowhere. Yeah. Yeah. So what would break that pattern? Yes. Someone to bystand or someone to follow. Someone to say, so tell me more about what's there. Or somebody to say, so I noticed that there are two different conversations happening right now. Which one do we want to continue? So that's a bit of a bystand with a move behind it. Cool? All right, here's the last one. So this is the one that Lauren and I had. We call this covert opposition. So if you were to make a move, great, and you were to follow, but you didn't really mean it, what would it look like? Yeah. So the action is, sure, okay, but not your intention, right? Right? So that can happen with follow, it can happen with bystand, and it can also happen with move. So it's really what I was pointing out that you did a minute ago. So sometimes when we don't agree or like what topic is on the table, so I think we should move from all Windows machines to Mac, somebody might say, okay, but it's not what they really intend. And so, or somebody might go, instead of moving to Mac, I think we should buy all iPads. So rather than have the conversation about why I disagree with the operating system, I've now moved us on to a new topic, but my intention is really to divert, and I don't have that conversation first. So covert actions, where we say something versus what we really intend, really is another pattern. And so part of what we're going for in this collective intelligence piece is that we want a conversation with all four actions to be active. And we want to create spaces where people can bring all four. Cool? Thank you guys very much. So how do you change stuck patterns? This is a little bit of a cheat sheet, but serial moves need follow and bystand. Courteous compliance needs oppose. Debate, advocacy needs inquiry. And it works, so opposes need to be followed. So these things, these are kind of rules of guidance when you're in a conversation, and they work at the micro level, so down at the sentence structure. They also work up at the larger level. So if you think back to the chart where it says, you know, reason that Agile is challenged in our organization is that we get resistance from management. Well, I don't necessarily believe that that resistance is a thing. I do believe that those are opposes that are not getting an opportunity to be voiced, and they don't get followed. And so it creates a stuck pattern that gets labeled or feels like resistance, when really what needs to happen is a different kind of conversation, where you can explore what is the oppose that people are maybe just not voicing. What is the conversation that we need to have that we're not having? So that's fostering collective intelligence. It's how do we make or help a group to be able to bring all four of those actions into our conversations. The second one is achieving change through dialogue. And there are two key points underneath this one, which is, I believe, and I think there's research that supports this, that in order for change to happen at an individual level or at an organizational level, we need learning and new thinking to occur. What happens today in our organizations is that we're so busy running down the road, getting the work done, that it's really difficult to carve out space and time to think together. It's challenging. And the other part of this is that we need to solve adaptive challenges that we get kind of caught in trying to solve adaptive challenges with technical solutions. So what does that mean? Well, first, whenever I say to somebody, so I really believe that this whole notion of dialogue is really important, and they'll go, yep, me too. And I have dialogues all the time. So I want you to do a little bit of a test with me. So I'm going to give you a set of different kinds of conversations that we all have, and they all have a place. And I want you to really check out how often you think you're having a dialogue with people that you work with. So a first kind of conversation is a monologue. I'm doing a lot of that tonight, and I don't typically like to do that. But it's a solo voice. That's kind of the metaphor for it. You hear one person. You might be in meetings where you feel like they're dominated by one particular person, and it might feel a bit like a monologue as well. The second one is debate. So we got to experience that last fall. Debate has a place, but it also has a feeling of kind of beatdown. It is a place where one is going to win and one is going to lose. That's generally how it's set up. It's the purpose. It's the intention of that. A discussion is a bit like sitting at a ping pong match. There's a back and forth nature to it. It's still got sides to it. Your side, my point, your point. There might be some mix in there, but it's a bit like watching a table tennis match. Skillful conversation, sometimes called facilitated conversation, is a bit where we start to get into sort of the metaphor is plowing a field. Right? So you get a little bit underneath the surface. It's not just surface level conversation, but you also start to understand what's underneath of something. So what has you say that? Or say more about what you're thinking? Or what do you see? Dialogue is the last one. And we talk about dialogue as being really a center, a topic with no sides. And it's like creating a pool of meaning. There's equal opportunity for people to voice. There is respect. There's suspension of your own beliefs. And there's a deepened listening to what's being said. It is also the place where real learning can happen because we can see different perspectives. We can start to let go of the thing that we believe is really, really true and start to see the truth in what someone else may believe. So a gentleman by the name of Otto Scharmer talks about there are 4 primary fields of conversation or processes that groups go through when they come together. And the first is courteous compliance. So it's been kind of happening tonight. You know, you came in, the room was set up in a particular order. We're not all really having a conversation, but there is a bit of the system that we're creating here in the room is a bit of courteous compliance. You're being polite, you're listening, I'm talking. You might be making notes or doing whatever, but there's sort of an implied set of norms, and you're following them. So there's a bit of a move and a follow. So what happens after a group's been together for a little while is that you'll start to notice the group can go into breakdown. It's where differing viewpoints come into the conversation. And groups don't particularly necessarily like to hang out in breakdown. So what happens is they go back and forth between courteous compliance and breakdown. So we're working fine, the structure is move and follow, and then that oppose comes in, and we do that for maybe a little while, and then we go back to courteous compliance because that wasn't a whole lot of fun, right? So we go back to steady state. But what we're really aiming for is to get through breakdown, because if we can get through breakdown, in the third stage is where we call what Otto Scharmer calls thinking together. It is the space of inquiry and curiosity. It's the place where we start to bring in more of that inquiry line. And then generative dialogue is the 4th stage. And those are the conversations that you walk out of and you wouldn't be able to assign the outcomes to any one particular person. It is a true we space. You wouldn't be able to nobody would be able to say, I came up with that idea, Darren came up with that one. And there's a path that you take through those. So from 1 through 4. So if we map those to the structure that we were just talking about, the structure that you see down in courteous compliance is move with a lot of follow. What you see in breakdown is move and oppose. And the feeling here is me versus you. We are sorting out who is right and who is wrong. And I'm really clear about which one is which. And in 3, in thinking together, you start to see move, oppose, bystand, and follow come in. But it's a little bit more in that kind of skillful conversation space where they feel a little separated, right? But it is the space of me and you. And then when you get to 4, generative dialogue, all 4 actions are in the conversation, and they just happen. It is the space of we. So one of our jobs as leaders is helping create the space that helps us get to the space for thinking together. And then what often comes from leaders is, well, wait a minute. That feels like it takes a lot of time. When would I do that versus when do I just do the thing that I really want to do, which is where I go into the meeting and tell people what they're going to do, and then we leave. So there's a space for it. And the question is to start thinking about, when is it time for us to come together and think together? When are we looking to create new, to be innovative? And when are we just looking to get stuff done? And I think one of the challenges is sorting out what kind of issue or challenge is in front of us at that particular moment in time. So Ron Heifetz wrote a book called Adaptive Leadership, which you might be familiar with. And in it, he uses a framework that I absolutely love. And it's the distinction between thinking about issues as technical problems, meaning problem is clear and easily solved by experts. I have a broken bone. I need a doctor. I will hire a doctor to fix my broken bone, put it in a cast, and it gets better. I need training on a particular topic. I go get the training. It's a technical problem, and it's easily solved by others. Adaptive challenges are problems that are often difficult to identify, and the solution that we're looking for typically requires a change in mindset, beliefs, new learning, values, and an exploration of understanding what works and what doesn't. It's too complex to just sort of do a plug and play on this will work and this won't. So back to our State of the Agile report. One example is on that board is insufficient training. So we could assume that that's likely maybe a technical problem. Figure out how to get more, figure out how to get more space, figure out how to get people in it, but it's a bit of a technical problem. Adaptive challenges are things like company philosophy at odds with core Agile values. My friends, that does not have one solution, nor will it be solved by one expert. You can't expertise that out. It is a series of conversations that need to take place in the organization. And often the reason that that's true is because the organization isn't taking the time to have the conversations that it needs to have with the people that it needs to have them with. And so these adaptive challenges, so here's another one, lack of management support, general organizational resistance to change. All of those are kinds of adaptive challenges. And one of the challenges as leaders is that we can fall into this trap of trying to solve adaptive challenges with technical solutions. So here's an example. So an organization says we need to be more innovative in order to regain our position in the industry. That is not unique. Many organizations are kind of having that conversation across sectors, banking, finance, gaming, services. It is a conversation that's pervasive right now. So technical solutions might look like reconfigure the office walls, remove all the walled offices, create collaborative space, hire a chief strategist to lead innovation, develop some internal taglines, and start promoting it. Right? So they've got sort of a clear path. Now, before anybody walks away, so I see lots of snickering. So these aren't bad. They're not wrong. They're helpful. We need them. And the pitfall, though, is that when organizations stop there. Because, so this organization that rolls all of this out, a year and a half from now, if nothing else occurred, you'll talk to people in the organization and they'll go, yeah, it was another one of those things. It became the flavor of the month, the thing, each organization has a way that they talk about it and tell the story. What I believe shifts that in a different direction, and this is just like an example. So take quarterly meetings and go off-site and have conversations with leaders at all levels about what's working and what's not working. What does innovation mean to us? What does that look like now versus what it looked like 3 or 4 months ago? Because I guarantee you the definition of that will change over time. So, we can't solve adaptive challenges with technical solutions only. It's a more holistic approach, and there are different kinds of conversations that we need to be having. So, you're going to find a partner again. And here's what I want you to check in on is, what's one adaptive challenge that you are currently faced with? And does it in any way relate to that Groundhog Day conversation that I asked you about in the beginning? So just 30 seconds, you can introduce yourself to somebody new, have a brief conversation, and then we'll hear from some of you. Okay. It's hard to cut those conversations off. You guys look like you're having lots of fun. So I would love to hear from some of you, and I want to start all the way in the back. Anybody want to share an adaptive challenge that you're currently faced with? Everybody's looking at one another going, not me. Awesome, thank you. Lack of transparency? Yeah. Ah, yes. Yeah. Yeah, lack of transparency and information hoarding. Great. And so one way to start thinking about your adaptive challenges is, can you start to tell the structural story of what's happening? You know, at a much higher level, where is their move? Where is their oppose? Where is their follow? And how can you start to shift those kinds of structures that are occurring at that level? So anybody else in the back have one you want to share? No? So let's come forward to the middle. Nice. Go for it. Mm. Mm. Nice. It's a great story. Thanks for sharing. Who else has one you're willing to share? Mm. Mm. Yeah. Nice. Do you have some thoughts, just having heard sort of the structural piece? Does anything stand out for you? I'm putting you on the spot, and you don't have to answer. You can just say, keep moving. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Nice. You know what, your comment just brought this to mind, so I'll give you the structural version of it, and then maybe you can see how it fits. But effective opposes, so one of the challenges in point and counterpoint, I've got a point and I've got a disagreement with it, is that we can get locked into that, and we're trying to offer an oppose that says, I don't want this or I don't like it. But what makes opposes more effective is if we, the one that has the oppose, can start with a follow and a bystand first. So I'll go back to my example. I want to move. So if I say I want to move all of the computers that we have from PCs to Macs, and you completely disagree with me, I think that's baloney. So if you just said to me, absolutely not, then we kind of stay locked in that sort of, I want to move to computers, absolutely not. But if the person that's got the absolutely not can find the thing to follow about my move, it gets the conversation started. So it might sound a little bit like, I can agree with you on the fact that we need to update our technology. Follow. A bystand would be, what I notice is that we are, the minimum age of our computers is 10, and some of them are 15 years old. And we're not really that productive anymore because of the slow technology that we have. What I disagree with is doing it this month, or doing it today, or moving to Mac. My move my suggestion would be that we do this instead. So if I have an oppose, there is an effective way to bring it in, and it often starts with follow and bystand. So it's follow allows us to find the thing. I often talk about sort of the 2% thing that we could agree on. And sometimes I don't agree on anything except I can align with a value that I see in the other person. So I see that you really care about us and the performance or the success that we have in this project. So that gives me something to follow. When we have follow and bystand, we can build on the conversation from there. But when it's the actions are just move and oppose, we stay locked. And so it just doesn't go anywhere. So, all right, what's one more adaptive challenge that you discussed? Yeah. Requirements at the last minute. Mm. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So do you get the sense, the difference of what happens and what makes an adaptive challenge a little bit different from a technical solution? Yeah. So a little bit of a recap of where we've been and a charge to you as leaders that I believe that one of the greatest impacts that we can have, sort of aligning to the topic of this meetup of what's next, where are we going with Agile leadership and Agile coaching, I believe it's how we help others have the kinds of conversations that can shift performance and change within organizations. How we can foster collective intelligence by reading a room and changing and noticing the patterns that are here and being able to change the pattern for the betterment of the group or the organization. And how we can find the places, it's not every day, but how can we find the needed places to actually hold dialogue for the sake of creating change. And it takes time. Those are the conversations that you don't just run into and start the clock and you've got 45 minutes until you're done and you're on to your next meeting. I think that that's one of our challenges in organizations today is that those meetings have a place and we're not carving out time for some of the other space to think together. And that is, so there was some research done by Google, you might have read it in the New York Times last year, where they, their study, sort of their quest of what produces high-performing teams. And two of the things that they found in that was a collective turn-taking, being able to have a balance in conversation with who was contributing and who wasn't. They found to be one of the norms that was the greatest predictor of whether a team was high-performing or not. Kind of fascinating. If you haven't read it, you should just Google it. It's in the New York Times. And so achieving change through dialogue takes time. It's not for every conversation. It's not for every issue or every problem. But those adaptive challenges that we keep showing up on charts every year that say these are the reasons why we're not moving this forward are the places to look, or the conversations that are your Groundhog Day conversations. There's another flag that says, how many times are we going to have to talk about this particular topic? It's an indicator that we haven't really talked about it, or we haven't talked about it at the level that we need to. So, my charge to you is how might you use and support the use of dialogue to create tipping points for positive change? Because I believe that we all have it in us the capability to create the space for that. Cool. Do you want to do Q&A? Yeah. So are there any questions, just in general? So in the back, so one and then two. Mm. So can you state the first part of your question again? So what would be some of the reasons why somebody would oppose in the conversation? And so why they're not willing to bring those? Awesome. Okay. So now I'm with you. No, it's okay. So I think there's a lot of I think there are a lot of reasons why somebody might not. What we're looking for is the action of voicing. So what happens with move, follow, oppose, and bystand is that we need all of them to come in. And if you have the impulse that says, I want to suggest this new thing, or I really disagree with this and I want to say it, there is the act of thinking it, and then there is the act of actually voicing it. And I think what prevents voicing from happening in those conversations often starts with trust. Have we created an environment? That was actually the second point that the Google study found, is that has there been psychological safety created enough in the conversation for that to happen? And one of the contributors of psychological safety was collective turn-taking. So how does that happen? Like, how do you as leaders create space for that? Partly is techniques like facilitating, using mechanisms that slow down the conversation enough for people to be able to voice. Checking to whether safety happens when people learn that they can say something that feels courageous or bold or in opposition, and they don't get fired, punished, and minimalized, right? So punishment can happen in lots of different ways. Firing is the worst sort of look of that offense. But it can happen all the way to, I'm the person facilitating and leading the meeting, and because, Tim, you opposed the last time, and I didn't particularly care for it, I'm just going to slightly turn my body from you every time you go to offer a comment again. And so it's starting to be aware of how we as leaders create and influence the space that allows for that, and that we actually actively call for it. So if I'm a leader of a team or an organization, whichever, I can say, so we've got something on the table. Who sees it differently? Who has a different perspective that they could bring into the conversation? So actively calling for it. And it's different. I want to distinguish that from the devil's advocate. I'm sort of on a soapbox here these days about devil's advocate, because I feel like when we put labels on people or things that they're doing, it encourages some and it discourages others. And what can happen in teams is we all will have one of those actions that we do more than we do the other three. So we'll have one, we might overly rely on oppose. We might be the person that's really strong in voicing oppose. What happens in a group is that if I'm the one that's strong in oppose, the group can start to assign that my role. So we'll look at him every time, or we'll look at her every time we're looking for an oppose, and we'll expect that person to be the one to voice it. They aren't roles, and we shouldn't assign them to people. So we don't really need to assign the role of devil's advocate. That's not helpful to the conversation. What we need is for everybody to take the responsibility of bringing it. And to call for it if we feel like we're maybe stuck in a pattern. That's a really long-winded answer. Does it help? Cool. Okay, so second.
Yeah, I was curious how you got your daughter to transition from a covert
Yes. So thank you. I meant to share that. So structurally, one of the things that I needed to do was find a way for Lauren to be the one that made a move. So instead of me being the one to constantly be moving, I would start to bystand, and I would say, we did two things, actually. She created a get ready chart that she wrote in her handwriting of all the things that needed to be done. And then in the mornings, I would start to say, so I noticed that it is 10 minutes before we're getting ready to leave. What do you need to do? So I made a bystand, and then I made a move. And she would start to say, well, I need to get my shoes on, and I need to get my backpack. And then I'd say, okay. And then she'd say, well, maybe I should do that now. I was like, that would be a great idea. So I had to find a way to let her be the one to make the move, and then I could follow her. It's not empowering for a 4-year-old, nor a 45-year-old, nor a 70-year-old for somebody else to constantly be making the moves, and they're expected to follow. And as leaders, we can kind of fall. That's one of the dangerous traps about the move action, is that we can fall into a pattern of thinking because we are the leader in a formal role, that it is our job to be the one making the moves. Actually, yes, and it's also our job to be allowing the team to make moves as well so that we too can follow. Yeah. Yes? Ah, thank you. Mm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great comment. Thank you. Just for those who couldn't hear, if I would recap is the importance of noticing the role that we individually play in the pattern that's playing out. And so my daughter is a great example. I went home and I didn't decide that I was going to tell her, hey, it's your job to change. What I had to do was change my conversation, the way I was entering those conversations and starting it out. So it's a great point. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yes. Mm. Mm. Could you call for it? Could you just say, who's got differing ideas, or who's got something that's opposite of what we have here? Yeah. Yeah, you could. Absolutely. You could just simply say, I'd like to hear things that are completely opposite or counter to what we've got, just as a mechanism of exploring. Yeah. 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 Yes.
Kind of as a follow-up to that, I noticed that the bystander role, if I've understood it correctly, is really the psychologist in the conversation,
Mm.
the one that reflects on the actual action rather than what's being said and being planned,
Yes.
but what the interaction is already going on.
Yeah.
So presumably, you could choose to be a bystander and say, this is what I see, all of you are agreeing on this action, and then call for a
Yeah.
is that
Yeah, absolutely. So she was saying that the bystand seems like it is a kind of a psychological commentary on what's happening. It is. We refer to it as a morally neutral comment. So it is a true bystand sort of drops any judgment that we might make about it. Seems like we can't get anything done around here. Wouldn't really fall into the category of a bystand. So can you state like what you're seeing? So it seems like we have a lot of alignment, right? And I'm wondering what other perspectives there might be. Or it feels like we've got, it feels like sometimes it depends on whether I've given the language to people, but I might just say, it feels like we've got courteous compliance. What do you want to do about it? So yes, there's ample opportunity to just sort of comment on what you're seeing, or ask others to ask others what they are seeing as well. Yeah.
You used the comment in the training, I don't know if you or Donata, we seem very confident in our solution, so what are we missing?
Yeah.
It was a good way to say, challenge the group to say, is this, we came to this, whether
Yeah, that's great. 1 and then 2. Yes. So the question was, what is the how much does the culture play on an impact? Much, really high. So there's 3 more levels to the theory of structural dynamics. We've sort of scratched the surface this evening, but the rest of the theory, what David talks about is that there are kind of 2 other contexts that are absolutely influencing how we show up in the room. One is the broader context, the social context, our norms within the organization, even the industry. So if you're in the financial industry or the service or the banking industry, all of those things are the things that are sort of outside the room that are in some ways influencing what's happening. In the room, the individual actions that we take or don't take absolutely change based on the group of people and the dynamics of that group. So if I work with Team A, I might bring more bystand when I'm with that group. And when I work with Team B, I might be what they call a disabled bystand because I don't voice it. I see it, but I don't say it because of the dynamics of the people who are there. So I can individually be different. And then there is what David calls the invisible reality. It is my personal stories, my beliefs, my mindset, all are under the surface, but in the room every time we're talking. So it could be that I have some personal memory of every time somebody says that, this is what happens. So that's what holds me back. So there's a lot at play for people. But yes, it absolutely influences what's happening. Yeah. Thank you.
It just, I'm very struck by the fact that it seems like for the leaders, it's like there's a constant creating of space for authentic communication and interaction without beating anybody over the head.
Yeah.
Like even when we say, okay, so it seems that we're very confident about our solutions and everything like that. There are ways of saying that and there are ways of saying that. So we're not only creating space out here for authentic communication, but we got to check our own authenticity.
Yeah.
Because if we have an agenda, it's going to come out.
Yeah.
It's going to be felt.
Yeah.
So people are not going to feel out.
Yes.
They will not feel out free.
Yeah.
To actually contribute.
It's a great point. It is what you're calling out is the difference between our intent, our action, and then our impact. And that the intent will often influence the impact, and then the action will be this other thing. It's the thing that creates dissonance, right? So when you intend one thing, but you do another, and then it has the impact of really the intention, it feels, and if somebody on the receiving end would go, I'm confused, or it feels, yeah. As much as we try to squelch that, every time I feel like I've got that figured out, I get feedback that it didn't. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
In an applied setting, would you ever expose this model to groups to actually make them more self-aware? Not make them, but allow them to be more self-aware.
Invite them to be more self-aware. Yeah.
As a way to invite them to be more outside of the teaching setting.
Yeah.
But in a real practical setting.
Yeah.
Do you just find that you kind of use that model just to observe and
So for me, it is part of my practice model. And when I work with leadership, so outside of training, when I work with leadership teams or I'm coaching teams, I absolutely bring it in. And the degree to which I bring it in is often different. So sometimes I just simply draw it on the board and say, watch the conversation. And as the team is having a conversation in their real work, I will just often comment on what I'm noticing in the pattern. So often it's bystanding, and I'm intending to grow their communicative competency in learning to figure out their patterns on their own so that they don't always need somebody commenting on the side. But it's a way of kind of building their muscle and noticing what's happening. But there are many people that do just that. So it's an internal model that they use, and they're mentally doing stuff, and they don't bother sharing it with anybody. They use it to code what's happening for them and change their behavior in that. So yeah, varied range. Yeah. Yes?
I have an unfinished thought.
Okay.
But I'm kind of reflecting a little bit on the times that I brought facilitation into teams for the first time in some cases. It's sort of like, it's likely that they've never had someone play the bystand role when facilitation brings that in.
Mm-hmm.
And it causes there to be a very different dynamic. Am I kind of thinking about it maybe the right way?
Yeah. So Tim's comment was, in teaching new facilitators facilitation, it's often that we are teaching facilitators to bystand often what's happening. And facilitators, so if I were up here and you were charged with creating something wonderful today, and I was going to facilitate, I am going to bring bystand into the conversation. I'm also going to make moves. Right? So I've done it multiple times. Have a conversation. Please stop having a conversation. Who wants to go? Who doesn't? So facilitators are very much in the role of making moves, which is part of what makes it leadership. Right? It's just a different style. But yes, facilitation and coaching does come more at a broad general level, comes more from that bystand. What are you seeing? I think bystand, what I see often informs what I do in the room. Yeah? Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? You guys have been like a really very thoughtful group of people with your questions tonight. Yeah? Cool. Thank you.
Parting thought and then one last parting comment. There's a book called Good to Great, which I don't know if it's required consultant reading, but it feels like it. This concept of mirrors and windows and how much we should concentrate on the mirror first and then look out the window and start judging others second. And so this often reminds me, or the way this model is structured is really trying to get awareness of where you're at, what you're doing, and how you're influencing the group or the intent or whatever it is your daughter trying to get her shoes on. Like, what are you contributing to that situation? And then figure out your awareness from a facilitator, from a consultant, from a contributor to your organization, how that is playing out across your organization. So it's been a very interesting, as we start layering this onion we call consulting and business practices together. This one sort of brings that home, is where do you sit in the model normally in a situation? So with that said, I'd like to reach out to you guys, the community, and we're going to sort of brainstorm after this session and figure out where we're at. I threw the Innovation Center a couple curveballs today, and I'd like to apologize to Kurt, who is standing behind us, and hopefully he can hear me. Thank you. So also like to thank the Booz Allen folks who helped facilitate and get this through. And then for those of you outside those two circles, thank you for showing up and something new that we wanted to try. And a big thank you to Marcia for coming on stage after a long week away from home last week and to come right into this Monday night. So thank you, everyone. We'll look to follow up and have a good evening.